Hi, I'm your host, Brent. Welcome to the Climate Guru, where we discuss pressing environmental issues, including with leading experts. Join us for insightful conversations to inform and inspire action in your everyday life. This is going to be an audio for a podcast on the vice presidential candidates that we have. J.D. Vance, who is the candidate for Trump, and of course, Tim Walz, the vice presidential candidate for Kamala Harris. We just finished a podcast on the differences between Trump and Harris and what they would bring to the White House in leadership for climate change and global warming. The difference is vast. Please listen to our podcast on that issue. Taking a look at the vice presidential candidates, Mr. Walz served 6 terms in Congress and then became governor, and he is in his second term as governor. Tim Walz has been a steady vote for policies that would protect the environment and reduce global warming and climate change. And in 6 years in Congress, he was known as a reliable vote for democratic environmental policies. Recently, Walz said, "Climate change is an existential threat that impacts all of Minnesotans and our ability to thrive." In his 2 terms as governor of Minnesota, Mr. Walz signed some very important legislation to move Minnesota towards renewable energies. He signed a law in 2023 requiring Minnesota to get all of its electricity from wind, solar, and other carbon-free sources by 2040, and to eliminate the dirty carbon fuels, coal and gas-fired plants by that time. That's a very, very aggressive policy and law, and perhaps the most aggressive in the country. He also signed 40 other climate initiatives, including tax rebates for electric vehicles, and he's expanding the number of EV charging stations throughout the state. He's signed a law recently to streamline renewable energy projects approval. The League of Conservation Voters, which grades legislators, governors on their climate record, gave Tim Walz the highest grade that's available. We can expect that if he and Kamala Harris are elected to the White House, they will be champions for the environment to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases and move the country towards renewables. They'll be a champion for that important cause. Let's have a look at J.D. Vance's history of policies on the environment and climate and what he would bring to the White House if he's elected along with Donald Trump. Like Donald Trump, he's a climate denier. Donald Trump recently said climate change is a hoax. Like Donald Trump, as contained in the 2025 project, the plan being written by Trump Inner Circle, if he's elected president, they will essentially dismantle the Inflation Reduction Act, which is Biden's landmark 2022 climate law, the most comprehensive climate legislation ever passed in the history of the world, with $400 billion being allocated for projects to move us towards renewables and protect those in frontline communities and many other things to move us in the direction we need to save the environment. Instead of a federal tax credit for electric vehicles, Vance instead says, let's offer tax credits for U.S.-made vehicles that are only powered by gasoline or diesel. Imagine. We can expect Vance to be true to his word, a climate denier who's happy to do everything for big oil and pad their profits at the expense of working people, says Lori Lodes, Director of Advocacy at Climate Power. The League of Conservation Voters gave Vance a score of 0 for 2023. In the Senate, he's a senator from Ohio, and a 0 for lifetime score as an elected official. He's been a big advocate of hydraulic fracking, which produces more oil and gas. The United States is now the largest producer of oil and gas in the world, and we are a major exporter. Climate scientists tell us that's exactly what we don't need to do in order to reach the goals of the Paris Climate Accords of 2015, which is to sharply reduce the amount of greenhouse gases, especially carbon, if we're to meet those goals of keeping global warming below 2 degrees Celsius or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Big Oil gave Vance more than $283,000 on his election campaign, one of the highest in Congress. A spokesman for Ohio Oil and Gas Association said, Vance is somebody who understands what kind of people we are and how we do it. Vance said wind turbines are hideously ugly and echoed Trump's ridiculous claim that they kill all the birds. Under him, clean energy growth will be stifled. As we know, Donald Trump rolled back 100 environmental laws when he was president, and we expect more of the same. Even though Vance says he'd like to get rid of much of the landmark environmental legislation passed by the Biden administration, the Inflation Reduction Act, it does much for Ohio, where he's a senator, where there are a lot of programs and projects in place that are projects that convert to renewable energy and add much money and jobs to Ohioans. Vance kind of switched his view and his rhetoric on climate change as he did in general on issues of radical right-wing policies. As he progressed in politics as an elected official, he became further to the right as he found that it was convenient for him. He once called Donald Trump a fascist, a Nazi he could never support, and now, of course, he embraces him. So he's an opportunist. Vance, of course, wrote this book, a purported autobiography, Hillbilly Elegy, about growing up in southwestern Ohio. But those who have read it criticize him for ignoring the social ills that affect the poorest regions of the country, Appalachia, where he claims he was from. And it includes a history of very severe environmental damage, especially from coal mines, strip mines, and he ignores those issues. So as he rises in the Republican Party, his positions become further to the right. He embraces Trump now as his savior, as opposed to being a Nazi and Hitler. And he expresses doubt now about human-driven climate change, even though it's an accepted fact. So like the contrast between Kamala Harris, an advocate for the environment and for converting to renewables, Donald Trump, the opposite, saying that climate change is a hoax, said he would accept $1 billion from Big Oil recently, and in exchange would roll back any environmental policy that would affect or inhibit their profits. J.D. Vance can be expected to carry water for Donald Trump and for Big Oil. Kamala Harris, if she's elected, will have a very strong advocate in her vice president, which is Tim Walz, who has been a strong advocate for the environment, and they can be expected to further the Inflation Reduction Act, the landmark legislation passed by the Biden administration, and be a real strong partner to bring America where it needs to be. Thank you, Climate Guru, signing out. Thanks for tuning in to the Climate Guru podcast. Stay inspired, stay informed, and keep taking action for our planet's future. Until next time, and remember, together we can make a difference.